World's largest economy, the United States of America, is running out of cash, and if they don't do anything about it before the 1st of June, the superpower could default. It's like a ticking time bomb for America's economy. Next week, the American government could default.
Government could soon start running out of money. Discussions to raise the debt ceiling were productive, but Washington still doesn't have a deal.
Hello everyone, I'm Piyush. Welcome to my channel. In this video, we will see what is the US debt ceiling, what will be its consequences on the US as well as the countries around the world, and what we can do about it. So without wasting any time, let's get into it. So recently there have been many reports that US might default on its loan for the first time, and it might have a huge effect on the US markets as well as other countries around the world. Now you might wonder, in spite of being the largest economy in the world with a GDP of $20.24 trillion, how can the US default on its loan? So in spite of having the highest GDP in the world, the US has to borrow money to finance wars, increase government spendings, spend on construction, increase social security benefits for the older people, and many other things. The revenue that the US government collects from the people, that is through taxes, is not enough to cover the expenses that they have. The US always spends more than it earns. The GDP of the US is $20.24 trillion, whereas the borrowings that they have is around $31.4 trillion, which is even more than the GDP of the US. US government borrows money by issuing bonds or treasuries, which common people like you and me can buy, and even the bigger countries such as China, India, Japan, or any other countries can buy. So the investors are rest assured that they will get this fixed interest rate when the bond matures. People around the world have faith in the US government because the economy is so strong. They have never defaulted on its loan. So people see this as a safe place to keep their money in because the dollar is also strengthening. The US economy is strong. They have a lot of spending. They create jobs. They create businesses. So now even if US has all the faith from the world, there is a limit on how much it can borrow from outside investors. You can consider it similar to the credit card limit that you and me have. Say for example, you have a credit limit of $1,000 on your credit card. You know that you can't borrow any more than $1,000. Similarly, the US has a credit limit. Just the fancy word for that is US debt ceiling, which is the top limit on how much the US government can borrow. Right now it is set at $31.4 trillion, and the borrowing has almost reached $31.4 trillion. So the US has maxed out their credit card, similar to the people who always max out their credit card and borrow up to their credit limit. So hitting the debt ceiling is a huge event in the US because this is where the government has two options with them. One is that they can increase the debt limit. If you are wondering whether the US government can really do that, a thing to note is that they have already increased their debt ceiling 78 times since the 1960s. Yes, I know it's really shocking, but it's true that they have increased their debt ceiling so many times in the past, and no wonder they might still continue doing it in the future because they will always need to borrow money. The Secretary of the US Treasury, Janet Yellen, already told the media that they would run out of cash by June of 5th if the government doesn't decide to increase the debt ceiling. This brings us to the second option that the US government has. They would have to default on their loans, which will be a huge global event because it will not only impact the US economy, it will have a cascading effect on all the other economies around the world. So just to mention some of the events that might take place if the US defaults are, first is that people will start losing faith in the US government. It will no longer be seen as the safest place to invest your money in, which will ultimately result in higher borrowing costs for the US government. Suppose currently, because of the good faith of the government, they are able to borrow money at a 2% interest rate. If they default, it will no longer be at 2%. People will start demanding say 2.5 or 3%, which will lead to huge borrowing cost for the US government. The second is that US dollar will start to weaken because many people will start pulling their money out of the US and putting in some other developed nations or some developing nations. Third, weakening of the dollar would result in a credit crunch in the US economy, which means that there won't be much money flowing around the US economy. Small businesses wouldn't be able to get loans that easily, because of which they would have to cut spending, they would have to lay off the employees, which will again have a big impact on the US. People will start losing their jobs. There will be unemployment increase. Fourth is that as the US is the strongest economy in the world, any impact on the US economy will have a domino effect on all the other economies around the world. So the one decision by US government on defaulting on its loan will have a huge domino effect on every other industries, on every other countries around the world, and this might be catastrophic event. The stock market might collapse, the US dollar might weaken, the US economy might fall, and there are many other possibilities. And many people in the US depend on their social security checks. The US government provides social security checks every month to the retired people so that they can cover their expenses. If the US has to default on its loan, they would have to prioritize their money. So the preference for the government would be to first pay the interest on the loan that they have borrowed and then focus on the social security benefit. This would result in the delayed social security checks. The people in the US who are only dependent on the social security checks would have a hard time paying their expenses. The default would also result in downgrading of the US bonds. As I previously mentioned, people will no longer see US as the safest option and they would demand more interest rates if the US has to borrow money. So for this reason, the US President Joe Biden and a Republican negotiator have been negotiating for weeks on how to increase the debt ceiling. It's not that easy. There are many conditions to be fulfilled. The latest report tells us that the deal is almost finalized. Seeing the past, we can already note that the US government would definitely go with the first option, that is increasing the debt ceiling. The deal is almost finalized. There are only some minor formalities to be made. Answering the question of what you and I should do in this economy, the simple answer is you should only focus on yourself. The US government will take care of itself. They have always found out a way on how to handle this thing, so you don't have to worry much about that. Only focus on what you can do. Focus on tracking your money. Make sure you keep a budget. Don't overspend the money like US government does. Start investing your money if you haven't done already. Plan on some side hustles so that you have extra source of income. Make sure to have an emergency fund, so in case there is some catastrophic event because of the US government, you will have some money to pay for your expenses, and then you can think on what you can do in the future. Focus on upgrading your skills. Learn as much as you can. Sharpen your mind so that you are valued in the market. The most important thing is that you focus on yourself, because there is all the news around you that might make you feel negative, but you should be positive about the future and you should only focus on what you can do to improve yourself, because we can't make a decision for the US government. So yeah, that's it from my end. Comment down your thoughts below what you think about this. Like and subscribe my channel if you find my content useful. Thank you again for watching this video. Until next time.